Thank you for joining us back after our break. I hope you got a chance to visit the virtual booths of different companies in Africa or doing business in Africa so that you can see what the continent has to offer. So I'm very excited that we're going to go into our next panel discussion, which is moderated again by Ms. Yavi Madurai, all the way from South Africa. And we will be discussing opportunities in regional economic communities, just as we discussed the AFCFTA in the morning session. So I want to go ahead and welcome Yavi so that you can be able to let us know who the panelists are, and we can have that wonderful discussion about regional economic communities. So Yavi, go ahead and join in, and welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you, Anne. Thank you again for the introduction and for the warm welcome. The first session was enlightening, to say the least. And we are going to head into the second session of the day and of the conference. And I've got a stellar lineup with me again in this session as we discuss the AFCFTA, this time with regard to regional economic communities, or the RECs as we call them. I've got a wonderful lineup of people and lots of women on the panel, which I'm very excited about. So let us get right into it. My name is Yavi Madurai. I am the Executive Director of the Pan-African Business Women's Association, or PABWA, as we like to call it. We are a think tank for economic transformation, specifically focused on women and youth, and specifically looking at trade, or women in trade and youth in trade. And I like to say that the AFCFTA is in our DNA. Let me introduce to you our stellar lineup of speakers and thought leaders, opinion leaders, and experts joining us today to discuss the opportunities on the AFCFTA for the RECs from a regional perspective. So first up is His Excellency, Dr. Mokhtar GHAMBOU. Welcome, Your Excellency, the Ambassador of the Kingdom of Morocco in Kenya. Welcome, it's lovely to have you with us today. We then have Juliet Archibong, the CEO of Adiaha Trading from ECOWAS, in terms of the REC that she belongs to. So basically, I would also be from SADC. We then have Mr. John Bosco Kalisa, the CEO of the East Africa Business Council, the EAC. We have my dear friend, it's so lovely to see you, Ms. Mbini, Ms. Mbini Kutta from Kutta Consulting and from the SADC region. It's so lovely to have all of you. I'm going to please ask you to just do your quick introductions in terms of just 3 highlights about yourself before we head into the session itself and start having the discussions. Your Excellency, I'd like to start with you. If you can please just give us a brief introduction, and then we will move to the next participant.
Sarah? Yes, hello?
I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I don't know how to handle these devices. So thank you very much for inviting me. And well, basically, I'm the ambassador of the Kingdom of Morocco, and this is my 5th year. And before that, my background is academic. I was a professor at Yale University. And then when I went back to Morocco about 10 years ago, I was the member of the parliament. So these are the things that actually shape what I do and what I intend to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Miss Juliet Archibong, her name on WhatsApp is Lady Juliet, so I'm going to call you Lady Juliet. Your introduction, please.
Hi, good morning, ladies. It's still morning in Nigeria. My name is Juliet Archibong. I'm Nigerian. I'm an international trade expert. I like to put it, consultant. I handle trade promotions particularly, and then I head a market access, market entry agency in Lagos, Nigeria. This is basically what I do every day, and my angle to this is I deal directly with the day-to-day cross-border trade facilitation and, you know, the physical realities of how the AFCFTA shapes these things in terms of trade. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. Mr. John Bosco Kalisa, welcome.
Yes, thank you very much, Lavi, and good morning. I am here in Arusha, Tanzania, in East Africa. It's morning, and yeah, I'm John Bosco Kalisa. I'm a trade economist. I do a lot of trade promotion, and I'm very passionate about trade and the private sector development. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And Miss Mbini Kutta, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Yavi. Hi, it's good to see you here in Nairobi.
Oh, is that where you're hanging out these days? Welcome, Mbini.
No. My name is Mbini Kutta. I'm the Managing Director of Kutta Consulting. I'm a South African that is based in Luanda, Angola. So I live in Angola. My company basically is responsible to implement trade agreements. When I started my career in trade, I was more in trade negotiations. So I worked with the private sector to influence the trade negotiations. And currently, I'm more in the implementation side. I work on customs issues. The biggest client that I currently work with, where I get more experience on the continental FTA, is SADC. So I work with all 16 member states of SADC, and my responsibility is to implement a trade agreement, part of the trade agreement, which is the SADC Protocol on Trade. So this assisted me to see actually the issues that are there with the overlapping membership in Africa, because in SADC, we don't only have the SADC members, we also have COMESA and we have EAC. So that is what clarified to me why, as Africa, we are capable of implementing actually this agreement, because we have so much experience in terms of working with different recs as one rec and accommodating other recs, because they also have their own trade agreement among themselves. So in the nutshell, that's who I am. So I do work on the continental FTA now, on the implementation side, and assisting them, the private sector, to better understand how it is and to simplify it. Thank you so much, Yavi.
Thank you, Mbini. So let's get straight into it. We are talking today the opportunities for the RECs when it comes to the AFCFTA. The whole idea behind the AFCFTA, as we all know, is to stimulate intercontinental or intra-African trade. Comparatively speaking, as we know, intra-European trade sits at just under 70%. Intra-Asia trade sits at about 60%, give or take, in 2019 last figures. Africa, or intra-Africa trade, sits at a dismal between 15 to 18% intra-African trade. We are a fragmented continent, basically probably highly likely due to the colonization that impacted the continent and the various countries. So it is easier for us to go to our colonizer countries, and I'll use South Africa as an example. Our colonizer was the British, so it's easier for us to go to the UK than it is for us to come to Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, etc. So when it comes to the regional economic communities, the AFCFTA's vision was that this is where the AFCFTA would be implemented best. So where there is already trade agreements that are in place within the various RECs, so country to country within SADC, ECOWAS, etc., this is how we are able to start, focus, enhance, and as Anne likes to say, level up. So in terms of how we take that forward, and in terms of how we look at increasing the intra-African trade, it's now about how the RECs are going to trade with each other, as Mbini was alluding to, in terms of stimulating that growth. We have a 2030 goal of at least stimulating from 18% intra-Africa trade to 30% intra-Africa trade. And for us to be able to do that, the RECs need to be optimizing and taking their capacity to the next level. Your Excellency, I'm going to start with you in terms of Morocco, and you are based in Kenya. What does that look like for you in terms of the status of the RECs? We've got RECs that are at various levels of preparedness, various status levels in terms of cross-border trade. What does that look like for you in terms of, East Africa, Morocco? What does that look like, and what are some of the steps that you are taking as Morocco from a preparedness perspective in terms of the operationalization of the AFCFTA and when it becomes fully operationalized?
Okay, thank you very much. I thought that I would be the last speaker on the panel, but anyway, I can start, no problem. I think you raised very important questions. And you said something about, this idea of, there is this troubling reference of always going back to colonialism as one of the reasons to blame for the setback for all types of problems in Africa. But I think it's about time. I mean, like, it's more than 1 century now that since the Berlin Conference that divided Africa into different countries, divided countries, and as you put it, fragmented countries. So the thing that rather than fragmented, I would use the word bordered Africa, because borders really still continue. Actually, sometimes, even the empire opened its borders within, whether you talk about North Africa or East Africa or different parts, regions of Africa. Borders still like a big issue. And if you talk about the dreams that we put on the AFCFTA, one of the first challenges is how to open borders. And now we're ready. Do we have the political will to do that? But I think it's about time to really use this value of self-criticism to blame ourselves rather than keep blaming colonial powers. That's history that happened, unfortunately, but it's about time. That does not exclude our share now in the present of really doing what we should do for the continent. So this theme, of course, is very, very interesting for diplomats, because if you think about, sometimes when you think about trade, it's not a new concept when you talk about diplomacy, because trade was the main reason why diplomatic missions were established. If you go back to the ancient times of the Phoenician, already the friendly relations were necessary in order to do trade. That's actually the first time that we thought about trade. And from the Moroccan perspective, we started actually aware of it. As early as the 14th century, Morocco started having diplomatic missions in Europe, particularly, and that's actually to protect whatever that trade exists at that time. So, I represent a country that is actually, this theme is very important because Morocco, as you know, has a strategic location, which makes it very attractive to various economic powers. Morocco is, as we try to sort of map it, is some sort of a bridge, solid one, or an exciting dynamic bridge between East and West, which is the Middle East and Americas, and between South and North, Africa and Europe. And also one of the, in order to do trade, in order to do any kind of economic development, you need stability. And Morocco is an old nation going back to 12th century. It's at least as old as 12 centuries, and that actually sort of made Morocco really some sort of a hub in the world, especially on the Mediterranean, also on the Atlantic. So, but of course, we're one of the really supported the AFCFTA, but we did not stop just at that kind of support. We started actually since the talk started about the importance of AFCFTA, Morocco started to set up the necessary tools and structures to make it achievable. So first I will start with the political will, and that political was expressed by His Majesty's approach, the approach that is actually well known now in Africa called South-South cooperation. And I know there was talk about South-South cooperation before, but it was rather a rhetoric during the Cold War. But now South-South cooperation, according to His Majesty, is not just politics, it is a policy. So what that means is that we have to accompany it with by setting up different structures economically, socially, and all sectors, private, public. And just a reminder, Morocco over the past 3 years signed at least like more than 1,000 bilateral treaties with our African partners. And also we did something that is very exciting, and I don't know what was done somewhere else, is we started Pan-Africanizing, you know, the term Pan-African, Pan-Africanizing our institutions. It's not enough to just sort of keep them within the national framework, but we started to add this dimension of Pan-Africanism to our big institutions. And I would start here with the well-known OCP group, which is now, there is the OCP Africa group, or OCP Group Africa. And that's very important because OCP is the world's largest producer of fertilizers. So, and the issue of food security continues to be very challenging in Africa. So OCP comes here, and then we had a planned $5 billion project in Ethiopia. Half of it was already allocated, and we did the same projects also in Ghana and Nigeria. And there are many other companies, and also we started actually sort of, you heard maybe about these Pan-African projects regarding energy, and there is the pipeline, the Moroccan, the Moroccan-Nigerian gas pipeline that would connect Nigeria all the way to Morocco, supplying gas and then to Europe. So these are big projects that are going to be really important for the free trade in Africa. And when it comes to East African community, and I always actually, when I'm asked to speak about the relationship between the two regions, unfortunately, we don't have a region because our borders with Algeria were closed in 1994. So we are trying to really sort of see where Moroccan investment and trade can really develop. And now we could actually be very proud that Morocco is the first African investor in West Africa, and the second African investor at the level of the continent, which is a very good thing that lead us to really sort of look not just in West Africa, but also in regions like East Africa. East Africa is important to us, and I always say this. Why? Because the economic products here, or trade in East Africa and trade in Morocco can be matched very easily, because it avoids this aggressive competition that's actually characteristic of many regional economic blocks like ECOWAS, COMESA, and so forth. Why? Because if you just think about East African community, trade is sometimes challenged. Why? Because the countries of the East African community produce the same product, the same things, like coffee, tea. But if I take the example of Morocco, you know, in Morocco, we drink tea and coffee at least 3 times a day, but we don't grow them, which makes us really like if you think about our economic relations, Morocco and East African community with Kenya, it means that it adds this added value of complementarity. And the most important other example that I would cite is also fertilizers. You know, Kenya doesn't have fertilizers. Agriculture is really the backbone of the economy. And Morocco, as I said before, has fertilizers. So the question here, like I'm just sort of jumping. If we talk about East African community, ECOWAS, COMESA, the question that I would ask later, is it going to be actually, are they going to be alive after everybody signed or get into the AFCFTA? One, and then the challenges for me, of course, the challenges for to be ready for the AFCFTA, there is a big challenge of infrastructure. So we have been aware of this about over the past 5 years, and we started, like, just to give an example about the infrastructure in Morocco. The road infrastructure is doing very well. We have about more than 1,800 kilometers of highways, and we're trying to connect east of Morocco, which is the border with Algeria, all the way, like the highways, and go all the way to Agadir. From Agadir, we have expressway. We're actually sort of already working on that to connect them to Mauritania. So this is a perfect example how you connect the Maghreb with West Africa. And the infrastructure too, we've been aware, and in addition to roads, we think that the ports are very important. And maybe you know that Tangimed, this big port on the Mediterranean, which is about just 12 miles away from Spain, is becoming really the international route for many trade traffic. And there's the ports, and there's also actually building another port on Dakhla in the Sahara, and it's called the Atlantic port of the Dakhla. So in addition to the Mediterranean, we're going to have this port on the Atlantic coast. It will be one of the biggest on the African Atlantic coast. And you know, also, when you talk about food security, I talked of the OCP fertilizers, and even if the OCP is not just a seller of fertilizer, but it's an institution that is research. And here the importance of preparing the young generation to accept this dream, or to really engage or to commit to it, AFCFTA, by really education. And you know, Morocco has been invested in this for a long time, and we receive 11,000 students from Africa annually, and 10,000 of them have scholarships, because we trade. We are not going to just think about trade of sort of taking one product, one good from one place to another, but there should be a transfer of knowledge. There should be an exchange, academic treaties between all our universities to prepare the young generation. And this is also in terms of trade, this kind of mobility is going to be a transfer of knowledge from one corner from one region of Africa to another. So education, I said, is very important. Morocco also started actually presenting many offers of tax reliefs and tax facilities or tax exemptions. If you think about the East African community, again, most of the countries actually, when you import from here, you don't pay taxes, you just pay the VAT, which encourages a lot of Moroccan traders to actually come to this region, and especially now within, again, what I call the South-South cooperation, because it gives priority to our African partners. Going back again to this idea of colonialism, and we all ask this question of autonomy, our benchmarking, unfortunately, has been so far all the time between South and North. But I think this is the time, since we have some successful experiences and examples in Africa, this is the time to really shift and have an intra-African benchmarking. It's easier psychologically for a country to just ask the question, if my neighbor did it, so I can do it too, because we underwent the same sociological and historical conditions. And if one of us is successful, the other is going to be. So the African benchmarking is very, very interesting. And then when we talk about trade, through experience, I see like Moroccans trading here coming to East Africa, there is still the challenge of governance. Of course, this is something that we need to fix. And legislation, we need strong legislations to protect investors and traders if we really want to make the AFCFTA successful. So I go back to the same thing that I raised as a question about borders. So I think our dream or our objective, the urgent objective, should be to work together to transform borders, all types of borders, into economic bridges. And we are trying to do that, as I said. We did it in the east of Morocco. We are doing it in the Sahara, turning the Sahara into a hub, economic hub. Why? Because the Sahel is a troubled region, and I think through economic development, we really sort of answer to many questions of instability and of violence and terrorism and so forth. So again, and I hope that this is the kind of questions that we should really focus on. I mean, it's a little bit of a shame all the time we are talking about these big continental Pan-African projects, and yet you can see many countries, their borders are closed with each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I love that. I love that transforming borders, which tend to, you know, have connotations, well, physical connotations, but also symbolic of division, dividedness, but changing them into economic bridges. I think that is going to be the theme on which we, you know, discover the rest of this conversation. Mbini Kutta, I'm going to come to you and say to you, the RECs, you know, you've given us an introduction that says you work in SADC, but you work in ECOWAS and you work across all the various RECs. So the RECs have provided us with a solid ground for experiential learning. It's given us the ability to understand lessons and gives us a foundation for business cases. You know, if we look at it, we could use the lessons learned from the RECs and how they've created their trade environments in the implementation of the AFCFTA. It also is our entry points, like the ambassador is speaking about. These become entry points in terms of those borders, but entry points of economic bridging as opposed to borders being closed off from each other. And how we start to build that unity that the AFCFTA has engendered into it in terms of bringing back us as a continent and spurring intra-Africa trade. So give us some ideas, and briefly so, please. I obviously just want you to cover a few. You don't have to cover all. I know you know all of them. If you can just give us some of the highlights of some of the lessons learned, some of the innovations that the RECs have put in place in dealing with their implementation of trade agreements, and being able to say, these are some of the lessons that we can learn in the AFCFTA implementation. Mbini, that question.
Thank you so much, Yavi, for such a practical question. In fact, as Africans, we tend to be very difficult when we judge ourselves. We are in a situation that is unfortunately not enabling us to have a good relations, but we have done a lot to move forward, and that's what we are still doing. When I was part of the negotiators of the tripartite free trade agreement, which is between Southern Africa SADC, EAC and COMESA. This is what we learned, that we are really not far apart and we can be able to work well together. We do have an understanding, but we are just not talking to each other. And that process was also a big learning curve in terms of what we can achieve and how we can move forward to getting to have all these partnerships as Africans. And the most difficult part of the whole process is really implementation, because when you are engaging in the trade agreement, you are able to accommodate each other, because then it's talk. But then when it comes to the implementation now, and for the private sector to really get the benefits from the trade agreement, you find that it's really not as easy as it looked when you were talking. This is the other thing. The continental FTA is based on the existing rules, on the existing trade rules among the RECs, which means that we are experienced in handling similar rules, because these are rules that are already existing within the RECs. And we need to tap into that experience to be able now to better implement this new trade agreement. But now I'm going to come with the practical examples of where we find that the implementation between different RECs becomes complex. SADC is having its own trade protocol, the protocol on trade of SADC, which is the main trade agreement. Then you find that SADC is having the members which are the members of SADC and which are also the members of COMESA, like I said before, and also the members of the EAC. And then you find that the policies will have a bit of a friction or a bit of the policies that are not harmonized because it's different regions. And in that case, we have, for instance, in the committee that assisting with the implementation of the trade agreement on sugar. I'm happy that it's on sugar because the sugar, it seems to bring a lot of conflict within the continent. So in this committee, what we usually do, because you will, for instance, have a country like Tanzania that is going to have another agreement on the same commodity within the East African communities. And then they will be having their trade agreement, which may be in the context of SADC now, which may make it difficult for them to accommodate their SADC trading partners. And then in that case, we have managed to get to the point where we're able to know that there is potentially this issue. And then how do we come with a special and differential treatment that is going to accommodate Tanzania to better trade within SADC, whilst it is trading well within the context of the East African communities as well. So the African RECs, regional economic communities, they have a lot of experience to bring in these accommodations for each other so we can be able to trade. I'm not going to say that it is easy. It is something that needs the private sector to be involved. We have a strong involvement of the private sector, and then the customs, the different customs institutions within the countries and all of that. For instance, sometimes I would get a call from someone who is not able to pass their goods from one SADC member state to the other SADC member state, because there is a burden of administration when you are having the situation that Africa is in. And then you find that there is a missing documentation that doesn't allow the goods to move duty-free from one member state to the other member state, because there is a need for a lot of documentation, and which shows how much we need to have a working continental FTA, because we can have one, but we can have one that is not working. So that's why we need a working one with a strong private sector presence that is going to be able to state that this is the problem we have. So in this case, when you have these problems, then as the secretariat for this part of committee, then I am able to link them to talk to the different governments in terms of what needs to be done, because these issues are very urgent. So now you have in SADC already this kind of understanding that we have to be accommodating others, and then we will have such urgent issues that we urgently need to attend to someone who is stuck somewhere at the border who can't pass their goods to the other country. Sure. And now our talking as the RECs with each other is going to help. And one last example, currently we are working on reviewing some of the policies that we have in SADC trade, and we have borrowed from COMESA, what in COMESA they are doing, because some of the challenges we have are the challenges they had, and they have advanced in trying to resolve those issues. So this is very important for us because we have similar challenges. This helps us to move forward by learning from one another, so we don't reinvent the wheel. What is happening currently in the RECs is exactly what we need to do in the continental FTA, hence the RECs being the building block going forward. Thanks, Yavi.
Thank you, Mbini. No, exactly, Mbini. You know, and I mean, that's why we're having this discussion, right? So speaking of which, John, Bosco, Kalisa, we've got a business case right here with us now, with you. You know, so Mbini's been speaking about it from a SADC and from a very general perspective. The African Union Commission in 2019 said that the East African Community, or the EAC REC, is the most advanced REC for various reasons, but basically because they achieved a common market with goals of a monetary union and ultimately a political federation remaining. However, there are still challenges, but because it's the most successful REC, we need to use it as that case study to say, right, fine, you've achieved these things, but there are these challenges, and these challenges inform the lessons for us to teach ourselves in the implementation of the AFCFTA, like Mbini is saying. What should be done differently in terms of the lessons learned in terms of EAC? What should be the challenges that we focus on? And what should be the areas that we need to treat as urgent and critical and with a refined focus? So like a case study. John, the floor is open.
Again, good afternoon, good morning, those who are in a other different time zone. I want to again thank and appreciate the organizers for making this initiative, organizing this conference where we're talking about challenges in implementing the CFTA. It is exciting. It's an exciting moment as the region and the world is recovering back from devastation impact of COVID in our economies. So one of the game changers is the CFTA, implementation of the CFTA. Before I think I dive into the question, I want to again echo to the previous speaker that we have a very strong political will, a strong political commitment from the EAC. That has been one of the bedrock for being the most performing lake in the continent. When you look at where EAC is currently, we are moving towards. We've done a customs union. We are doing. We've done a common market. We are moving towards monetary union. So those are very important instruments for trade and for economic growth. And again, not only looking at the integration, how we are integrated, but before COVID, the region was the fastest growing region. Generally, the 3 out of 10 the fastest growing countries were coming from East Africa. That demonstrates that the environment, the political as well as the business environment was conducive to propel the growth. And even now, as we are emerging from COVID, you find that our region, our countries, in a number of the countries are now posting 5.1% growth. That shows the commitment, that shows political commitment, that shows a very conducive macroeconomic environment for business and investment to thrive. And that is the spirit of integration. Integration is anchored on strong political momentum, strong political will. And that is the experience, the one I would share that for us to reap the benefit of the continental free trade area, the political will and commitment is the key. Again, having said that, when you look at the level of ratification at the EAC level for the CFTA, out of 6 partner states, 5 of them have already ratified and submitted the instrument of ratification under continental free trade area. And when we are almost 87%, we are almost meeting at the threshold. We are meeting the threshold of 9% before the year ends. So that shows you that the integration is working for East Africa. And when you ask me what is the magic bullet, why is it working in East Africa than another country? Again, that is a kind of partnership between private sector and the government. Strong dialogue, and that's our role as the ABC. We engage regularly and more often with the government in addressing those binding constraints to private sector development. So that's one. Then two, that is very critical, is the vibrance of our private sector and investment. The private sector here, from both micro, small, and medium term, is very dynamic, vibrant, flexible, and they are ready to trade. Generally, the African Trade Center, the study indicated that the East Africa, especially women, they take more trade preferences than other regions. Our women in business are able to take opportunities provided by our trade agreements because of our entrepreneurship culture within the EAC, both from the women, from the youth. The entrepreneurship culture is very strong at the EAC level. And that is very exciting. And when you look at the CFTA, the white is a game changer. White is going to really to have an impact, a strong impact. Is putting forward the role of youth in business and women in business to be taking advantage and to be driving the integration agenda. And that's what we have been doing at the EAC level. Having shared those good insights, again, as you rightly have mentioned, there are a number of challenges. Some of the daunting challenges, His Excellency mentioned, he mentioned them in terms of borders. The non-tariff barriers. The non-tariff barriers are still big challenges at the EAC level, and this hinders our growth of intra-regional trade. These are related to our customs procedures, the standards. They are related to roadblocks, way bridges. So the harmonization and agreeing on non-tariff barriers, how best we can remove them. That's where I see the big gain from the CFTA. The big gain comes from what I call the removal of NTBs and ensuring the compliance cost is lowered down. The administrative, the border measures and behind border measures need to be addressed. Those are the biggest challenge we have at the region. If we are to reap the significant benefits offered by CFTA, we need to ensure that we address the administrative hurdles that impede our trade across the region. So those relates to customs procedures. We need to build what we call trade integrity. We need to build trust and confidence among our trading partner. That is still lacking. So that is the challenge why these NTBs are emerging day and night. So when you ask me what we can do better, how CFTA can do it, the focus should be on the CFTA, should be on trade facilitation, remove those NTBs, enhance compliance, ensure there is a strong symbiotic relationship between government agencies and the private sector. So working together to resolve those NTBs would be a major breakthrough in terms of benefiting from CFTA. I think I've attempted to answer your question, Yavi. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, John. Thank you so much. Lady Juliet, regional integration is actually not an end in itself. It's a means to an end because it serves the purpose of sustainable development, economic growth, inclusivity, etc., etc. But there are constraints, and understanding those integration constraints, hindrances to the implementation of institutional infrastructure and other challenges when it comes to the REX will provide insights, it will provide challenges, it will provide bottlenecks, it will provide obstacles equally. So no one ever said this was going to be easy, and I don't think any one of us expected it to be easy. What are the constraints and hindrances that are within the context of the REX, within our power as governments, as countries, as organizations, to be able to put the money into the hands of the 1.3 billion Africans, because at the end of the day, that is why we are doing this. Everything we are doing is for that purpose. So just talk us through some of those things and how we get to that point of making it practical.
Okay, thank you, Yavi, and good morning again to everyone. So, what are the challenges? I have a large community of made in Africa manufacturers, and my day job is mostly to connect them to markets, so to global markets outside their countries. Majority of the, well, I would say one of the biggest challenges that we face is, on trade facilitation. So I would say that the key players in trade facilitations, which is the customs, have not been fully sensitized on the processes and protocols of the AfCFTA agreement. And it's a big thing. I would speak from my country, Nigeria. It's one thing for us to sit here and discuss on the policies that we have written, the agreements that have been signed. And it's another thing for the actual entrepreneurs to deal with a different thing at the point of exit or point of entry. There's a lot of, I would use the word breaking transmission at that phase, because I think that the key players, which is, I would say, the customs, have not been fully sensitized on facilitation process. The customs in my country is not focused on facilitation. They are focused on revenue generation. So the customs don't have an easy access to, or rather, they don't make trading, easy. There's a lot of drama around, documentation procedures. In the port of my country, there's, I'm sure it's in the news, everyone has heard about it. Most people here probably are aware of the dramas of the Nigerian port. There's a lot of bottlenecks in terms of moving goods from one point to another. This is the duty of the customs, and if the customs are not fully aware of the policies that are in place to enable intra-African trade, we are going to have a big problem. So I would say that that's a big challenge. The second challenge is trading within Africa means that you have to do freight, you have to do cargo, and that's a very expensive venture. I recently, I own certain retail businesses alongside my consulting. And recently I had a client from Zambia who purchased items from us. And to send 6 kg or 6.5 kg or thereabout to Lusaka was costing the same amount of the item, and then we're looking at it and saying, Lusaka is in Africa. We're not sending this to Europe or to the US. We're sending it within Africa. It's that expensive. This is very discouraging for anyone who is interested in trading with Africa. Or rather trading within Africa. The bottlenecks and this break in transmission, like I call it, we're sitting here and then we're discussing the policies. The offices, the SADC. There's a lot of agreements, but like Mbini said, implementation is there's no implementation anywhere. Maybe there is, but it's not translating to the average person. It's at a certain level. It doesn't get down here. So I'm speaking for the people who are down here. We're not able to access all the benefits of these things. And, like your question asked, are there hindrances that are within our power? These are definitely within our power at the government level to make this, this access easier for the entrepreneurs, for the 1.3 billion market. It's if we're not able to move goods from one point to another, then there's no market. There's no, the AfCFTA will only be a policy in the air. And then another policy will come in a few years. And then another policy will come. There's a lot of policies that will come after this. But we're not able to still trade. The money still doesn't get to the average person. We're not still able to move our economy forward because the people who are actually trading cannot move their goods. So definitely the first thing that I would say is within our power is making sure that implementation is clear to the key stakeholders of trade facilitation, which is the customs of each sovereign state. That they all have their custom agencies. And definitely, if this is not clear to them, on the protocols of the agreements that we have signed as a region, no one will move goods from one point to another. The second thing is the cost of freight within Africa. The cost of freight would hinder trade within Africa. So we can have new policies from here till tomorrow. But if the actual processes and the actual issues are not addressed, which is the access to trade, the facilitation, and the cost of these things, we're not going to be trading properly. Thank you, Yavi.
Thank you so much, Lady Juliet. So we've now spoken about the challenges, the hindrances, and all of the things that we have to overcome. From a REX perspective, from a country level perspective, what for you, and the question is for all of you, and as if I asked to please, to keep it concise in the interest of time, unfortunately. So if you can please give me no more than 2 or 3, responses. What are the opportunities for the REX in terms of the AFCFTA? Your Excellency, I'm coming back to you in terms of the second round to start off with.
Well, I think many interesting thoughts were there. So basically, in many conferences in Africa, we are not looking for arguments like new things. We just need, as Ms. Juliet said, the key word should be implementation. We sometimes turn big projects into rhetorical facts afterwards and we don't implement them. I think that all countries need to really sit down seriously and try to fix this problem of implementing. We have excellent thoughts, innovative, one. 2, I think we also have to tap in our youth and also our skilled African people. The big I forgot to actually mention the challenges for this big project of AFCFTA is still the skilled people. We have the big problem, the serious problem of brain drain. We are talking the paradox. Most of the world sometimes is worried about the illegal migrants coming from Africa, but nobody is actually taking the time to see the serious cost of brain drain, how our skilled people, they spend some of the time, they're educated, states spend a lot on them, on their education, primary education, secondary education, and then all of a sudden, when you need them, they are no longer there. I think all these challenges should be fixed together to give us like faith and trust in the free trade agreement in Africa.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Mbini, Kutta. What are the opportunities for the REX? And no more than 2 or 3, please. And please keep short.
Yavi, there are actually quite a lot of opportunities that are there, even for traders themselves. The opportunity that the REX have to take advantage of is unpacking the trade agreement, simplifying it. Because if the information is not going to a business or a trader who needs to trade, then it's futile. So the opportunity is there for skilling and for learning from one another, like I mentioned previously. I like what Mr. Aful in the previous session had stated in terms of making this very practical. I think that's where actually the opportunity lies. Make it very practical. The trade agreement is a complex issue because of the trade rules. They are very technical, but then our private sector has to understand what means. And our small business that are the new entrants in terms of trade have to understand what means what, so that we can be able to have people who didn't trade before getting the opportunity now to get into it. In particular, the women businesses that are always left behind, that they can be able to know that it is actually not as difficult as we think it is to be able to trade within Africa and to trade actually with the other third parties outside of Africa, and using the benefits of being part of the continental FTA. And understanding that there are parts of the agreement that are very complex, obviously, like the rules of origin, and they are creating an enabling environment for the countries to be able to access one another's raw materials and the resources. And then for people to be able to know that they can be able to import, for instance, from South Africa, you import in Kenya, the materials that are going to enable you to finish your products and be able to trade them, for instance, to send them to Egypt. So we just need the simplification of the rules. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to understand what we are benefiting from it. So the REX, the opportunity lies there in simplifying and unpacking the whole entire agreement. Thank you, Yavi, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mbini. John, in brief, in summary, what are the opportunities for the REX as you see it?
Yeah, thank you, Lavi. There are a number of opportunities quickly. One is that we need to strengthen our regional value chain to remain competitive. That's very critical. We need to develop and strengthen our regional value chain as REX so that we complement each other other than competing with each other. The second one, opportunities are there once we remove of NTBs and improve our compliance. The third one, which is very critical for women and youth, is rolling out of e-commerce platform. We need to roll out our digital innovation and e-commerce to reap the benefit of CFTA. Lastly, is empowering our youth and women to take advantage of the CFTA. So those are my few thoughts, Lavi. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Lady Juliet,
Yes,
in
please.
brief, what are the opportunities for the REX?
I would say that first and foremost, I'm very high on implementation. I'm very high on implementation because I think that that's the real thing, practicalizing this policy, unpacking the entire model. I would say, like we say in my country, there's a lot of big English, bogus English, practicalizing it and then digitalizing it. When you digitalize a process, you ease, access to this process. People are able to easily log on. They're able to fill out their documentations. They're able to carry out a process of export. It's very simplified. It's easier when these things are easily accessible. I can download this on my phone and it actually works. So it's one thing for us to, like I always say, it's one thing for us to say something, for us to have a bogus idea. It's another thing for us to actually put it into practice. So if each REC, if the RECs can take up these responsibilities, one region by another, we can easily simplify this process for each region. And we know that, okay, we finished with ours and then we meet the other one, they finished with theirs as well. It's a step-by-step thing. I understand that the AfCFTA thing it's not a one-day thing. And then it's not something that has been done before in Africa. So it's new. Everyone has to learn their way through, but we have to be as practical as possible as to what the possibilities are, what the end game is, what is the goal of the entire thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to my panelists for being brief but effective in terms of answering that question. I'm going to do a quick round robin in terms of closing statement, and the closing statement I want you to respond to is the African unity dream of Kwame Nkrumah still alive? And is it real? Because that's what the AFCFTA is about. So is it real? Is it alive? Do we want to be together, not just from a fluffy perspective, but from an economic growth, sustainable development? And when we are trading with each other, as Honorable David Osiani said this morning, when we are trading with each other, when we are making money, when we are building wealth, we are not going to be fighting and in wars. So is the dream of Kwame Nkrumah of African unity still alive? Your Excellency, your closing statement in response to that question.
Yes, I think Nkrumah pronounced this dream in Casablanca in 1961, the famous Casablanca bloc. Of course, if we compare the 60s to now, we can say that there is a big evolution of the African consciousness first. Second, very important, is that we are free of the colonial complex. Three, now Africa is knowing emerging economies all over the continent, which means that we have all the means it takes to really be unified, be strong as a continent. We just need to believe in ourselves.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think the believing in yourself is where we lack a bit as the continent. Mbini Kutta, is the dream still alive?
Of course, the dream is still alive. When we're talking the political will, we are excited when we hear of the political will, but I think it's up to us now. The generation before us was dreaming this. Now it's not the time for us to dream anymore. It's the time for us to implement. I'm looking now around you, Yavi, all the speakers, the amazing speakers there, being so passionate about it, which shows that we are definitely going to do it, and we are doing it for our children and their children and the generation that is going to come after us. And the dream is alive. We are still at it, but it's no longer the time to dream now. It's the time to implement it. And we're going to do it. We have to believe that we're going to do it, and it's going to work for our children. Thank you so much, Yavi.
Thank you, Mbini. John Kalisa, is the dream still alive? Is it being implemented? Where are we?
Yavi, thanks. I think one is that this is the CFTA is making the dream alive, and is happening. The commitment, the political will, they generally sharing it from the EAC where I stand. When you look at the country, they are no longer building infrastructure within themselves. They are building continental infrastructure. Look at what the railway from Kenya to covering other regions. So that was the dream for Kwame Nkrumah. He was saying he wanted to see the road infrastructure from Ghana to Kenya. This is what is happening. This is what CFTA is responding to. We are talking about having infrastructure from Cairo to Cape Town, and this is happening. The signing by heads of state in Kigali in March 2018, that demonstrates that the dream of Kwame Nkrumah is still alive. The commitment, the discussion like this, where I'm sitting with you, with others, that demonstrates that the dream is alive. So we have to make it alive. We must make it alive.
We must keep it alive. Lady Juliet, is the dream still alive? Is it being implemented? Are we seeing it tangibly represented? Where are we?
Yavi, are you at mine now?
Hey?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Yeah, I would say that we're almost there. We're almost there. There's a lot of happenings. There's a lot of progress being made from when that dream was first publicized. There's a lot of progress that has been made. So far, so good. I mean, who would have thought that in 2018, anything like AFCFTA agreement would actually come to fruition? But hey, here it is, which means there's a collective thinking, there's a collective progress which means we're headed somewhere. So I think that we're on track. We're not there yet, but we're on track. If we all, put in the work and we all have the same vision, we're headed in the same direction, I think that we're on track.
Thank you. On that note, we have come to the end, and I do apologize to the organizers. We are running over time. And it's purely because, Anne, look at how passionate every speaker was. But I didn't want to stop them. I just wanted them to continue. But in my closing statement to say, you've heard it here, you're hearing it all along, the dream of African unity. His Excellency spoke about adopting the culture of Pan-Africanism. We are going to change the future of Africa in our lifetime. If it hasn't been made clear to you this morning in both the sessions that I have moderated, let me say this much to you, is that it will change, we will change the future of Africa, and the way we're going to do that is via the AFCFTA. I'm Yavi Madurai from the Pan-African Businesswomen's Association. It has been an absolute pleasure and an absolute privilege to be with you this morning, and to Regal Africa Group and all of your partners. Thank you so much for having us. It's been a wonderful morning thus far, and I'll see you later. And for once, I'm not moderating.
Thank you, Yavi, for doing a great job moderating, and all the speakers. You were amazing. Yes, it's gone a little bit longer, but it was worthwhile. We learned about, the regional economic communities and how that ties in with the greater picture of the Africa continental trade area. And I loved what someone said about it was Kwame Nkrumah's dream, but now the vision is happening. We, the children of Africa, are making it happen. And now it is really, really an interesting place to be in. And for me, I keep saying, good neighbors are better than far friends. I've heard it somewhere, I don't know who says that, but good neighbors are better than far friends. And we are neighbors, and we are Africans, and we want our friends all over the world to support us, but we need to be collaborating together.